And I'm going to be talking quite a lot about what happened in the in the past, quite a long time ago. You don't have many photos from 5,000 years ago. But he wrote this book, and what I want to talk about is why what he wrote then is still relevant to the debates and the struggle that we have for women's liberation and gender liberation today. And in it, he applied the historical materialism that Camilla talked about, and Martin, the other two pictures that I've got there, you can use a bit later. I'm being joined by Polish women fighting back for abortion rights behind me. Crucially, what Engels argued was that women's oppression, or what he calls the world historic defeat of the female sex, arose because of the rise of class society. And the first fully fledged class societies arose around 5,000 years ago, sort of in the Middle East and then Egypt, and then they spread to other places. And so, but for millennia, really before that, humans had lived in egalitarian, nomadic hunter-gatherer groups. And until recently, some still did. So we can know quite a lot about them. And we also have accounts that missionaries gave, outraged accounts, I might say. Latifoe described Native American women living in dormitories where they received lovers as they chose. He also met people who talked about themselves as two-spirit people, perhaps would identify as transgender today, very respected in their society. There are accounts also of a collective approach to childcare, and people saying, "Look, I don't care whether this," men saying, "I don't care if this child's biologically mine or not. It's crying and it needs to be looked after." So that's what we know about how humans have lived for, over 150,000 years. I'm now going to go back to those first class societies of 5,000 years ago. And these new agricultural societies, people settled in one place and they were cultivating plants and animals. And what that meant was that they were able to accumulate property and wealth. And these were the first class societies. They could be much more productive with a division of labor, which meant they could support a class of people who are not directly engaged in production. And that class of people developed into a ruling class who could live from the proceeds of other people's labor. I think it's something we're quite familiar with today. Now, those first class societies, however, also demanded and made possible a high birth rate, unlike the previous nomadic societies that I was talking about, and the increasingly heavy, physically demanding work that their new technology created in these agricultural societies was shown to be incompatible with regular childbirth. Now, in our hunter-gatherer societies, the classless societies, there'd been a rough division of labor between the sexes, which women were mainly responsible for gathering plants and herbs, and their work was important, and they enjoyed social authority and autonomy. The new agricultural class societies from 5,000 years ago really broke that down. It broke them. What it meant was that the men were doing the economically productive work. Class divisions arose, which did divide men, of course, as well, but that ruling class was a male ruling class. And actually, even if we look today, actually it's pretty male even today, isn't it? So they would control society and impose their view of the world over those people they ruled. And Engels said, as wealth increased, it on the one hand gave the man a more important status in the family, and on the other created a stimulus to utilize this in order to overthrow the traditional order of inheritance. In descent up to then had actually been reckoned through the female line, through women. So now there was what these new wealthy people wanted to do was keep their wealth concentrated and not dissipated. So the question of inheritance became important. It mattered for the first time now to these men who their children were. They wanted to know who their heirs were. The result of this was a disaster for women, really. These things developed over a long period of time, I should say, but the end result really was that women lost control of their fertility and their bodies. And as Engels talked about, he said this imposition of monogamy for women. And Engels was very scathing about the Victorian hypocrisy, by the way, and very clear, as Marx and Engels quite frequently were in their writing, that men never had monogamy imposed on them. And if you look actually back at, those ancient Mesopotamian societies, for instance, the savage punishments really being meted out to women who might transgress, have affairs, you'd be impaled or burnt to death, and, literally, really, the Egyptians, under the Pharaoh ruling class, even broke the taboo against incest in order to keep wealth within the family. So, I think, Camilla was talking about this, the historical materialism. I think this is a brilliant example of it. The changes in technology, allowing the development of these agricultural societies, changing the way that people worked and the relationships they entered into when they did work, but also those changes impacting on all other aspects of society, and in particular impacting on the way the family was organized, the way children were brought up. Disastrously for women, as I said. So we know that the oppression of women goes back a long way, and the ancient idea that the domestic is women's natural sphere, of course, continues today, even as women go out to work as never before, and as the Glasgow women strikers show us, join unions as never before. And in 2020, we are defending the right to abortion and fighting for equal pay even now. And the family is something that has changed, as Engels showed, but the family under capitalism is a private sphere. It's separate from production. And Engels thought the working class family under capitalism wouldn't survive, but it has, and it plays a number of different roles. So for capitalism, it's a cheap way to bring up and reproduce the next generation of workers. It's also a useful place for workers to refresh themselves in order to be ready for exploitation the next day. And it saves the ruling class billions. No wonder politicians from David Cameron to Keir Starmer tell us what a marvellous institution it is. And of course, we know that women are expected to bear the brunt of responsibility for caring for the children, but the old and the sick and so on. And no wonder we're going to take the biggest hit from welfare cuts and pay massively, I think, for COVID austerity as well. So, and I think also that lockdown has shown the contradictory nature of the family today. Here we are, this is an alienated, difficult and frightening world. And it's not surprising that we seek out the care and nurturing that is so difficult to find anywhere else. And, of course, so much of the time, the family is that place of love and care. But we also know that the family can be an oppressive, violent and frightening place. I saw pre-pandemic figures show that 2 women a week are killed by a spouse or partner. So I think, as Camilla was talking about, ideas don't drive change by themselves. But I think what we see with the family under capitalism today is the way that it structures our ideas of the roles of men and women. That women are the carers, men are the competitive breadwinners, and all that stuff. That the heterosexual family is supposed to be the norm, and at best, same-sex relationships are accepted. But we always have to fight for our rights, don't we? And I think it also underpins a very polarized, very binary idea of what men and women are. And I think, so therefore, the root of transgender oppression as well. So Engels didn't really deal with these sorts of issues adequately, but we have to. He did say this. He said, a generation that has never known women's oppression, he said, will not care a rap about what we today think they should do. They will establish their own practice and their own public opinion. So I think Engels' arguments about women's oppression, and perhaps, more generally about oppression in general, all those brilliant Polish women, have obviously come under criticism. But I think Engels' main contention here is that women's oppression is not natural. It's not part of our biology. We can see how it started. That means we can end it. And 2 criticisms. One is that Engels reduces oppression to economics, and another would be that the family is some kind of private sphere and there has to be a separate struggle by women for liberation. But what I think Engels shows is that the oppression of women is rooted in the development of class society and the particular way this happened. that women's oppression and class exploitation are both part of the same system, capitalist system. Secondly, of course, women are divided by class. I don't know about anybody else, so I'll tell you what, I haven't got anything in common with Priti Patel or Dido Harding. So I think that what I think we learn from Engels, and I think this this is what's so relevant for us today, is that we need to end class society in order to end women's oppression, but that also the struggle against women's oppression and for gender liberation is also vital for the struggle against class society today. So solidarity with the women in Poland fighting for abortion rights. And thank you for letting me talk so long.